Cyprus, the Counterintelligence podcast, hosted by IXN Solutions, the company you turn to for corporate counterintelligence expertise and creators of 351X.
And we're live. Ryan, Rambo, good afternoon, my friend. How are you doing?
Jeremy, I'm doing pretty good. So over the weekend, I visited with my son and my grandsons. And, me and my wife have been empty nesters for about 6 years. And so we're not used to all the kid germs like we used to be. And our, resistance to sickness isn't as strong as it was at one point. And so I remember the moment my grandson got in my face and he was like, "Paw, paw." And whenever he did, all of those germs went straight into my nostril. I've been suffering from a sinus infection ever since. So, but other than that, I'm doing good. How are you doing, sir?
Oh, no, man. Well, I hope you get over that sinus infection. I'm sure you love seeing the grandkids. That was probably one of the highlights of the 4th of July weekend. And speedy recovery, brother. But you're still making it. You're still up and at it. I mean, we had several meetings this morning. You're actively engaged, giving demos. And boy, you're not playing like you have a sinus infection, brother.
Well, I'm faking it pretty hard, and thank God for Tylenol and Afrin and all of the other stuff. A little bit of ramen noodle soup. I mean, it keeps a guy going. So, but after the end of the day, I pretty much rack out for the evening. So, but dude,
Good deal.
another podcast, man. We're crushing it on the podcast side. What do you think?
Bro, we're what, just short of 50 right now. And for our audience out there, we shot a note out on LinkedIn this morning. We're going to host a panel, and we're going to do it on the 8th of August. So if there are any questions you have about counterintelligence, thoughts you want to ping our guest on, who will be Scott Sparks, Joe Sheridan, Dave Turner, Brian Velasquez, and Bryce Peterson all on board, shoot them over. You have a funny story you want to say about one of them? Better yet, let's do that. I'll give you a little more details at the end. We are getting after it, Ryan, since December, I believe we started.
Yeah, I think it's December, man. It's hard to believe it's already been 6 months, but yeah, it's flown by. This year has gone by so fast. So
I can't believe we're into July, brother. And the 4th of July is now beyond us. Wow.
I know it. I know it. Well, Jeremy, I'm excited about our progress, but I'm more excited about today's guest. And we've done a lot of firsts. We've had some Air Force people, we've had Navy people, we've had Air Force, Army, of course, civilians, corporate leaders. But this is the first time that we've been able to have a Marine on our show, a Marine counterintelligence officer. Guy, I'm so excited about it. And so without further ado, I want to introduce our guest, and his name is Mike Houle. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Jeremy. It's good to be with you guys today.
Yeah. Well, Mike, thank you so much for agreeing. We talked last week, and you kind of gave me a rundown of your backstory, and I was like, God, this is going to be a great conversation. So this is your show, and so we want to start telling your story. So I think probably before you graduated high school might be too early, unless you have some tidbits you'd like to reach back that far with. But man, if you don't mind, just start your story and tell us how it all began, where it's gone from.
Sure, appreciate it. First of all, my story as a Marine, as you mentioned earlier, we're kind of the Sasquatch out there. We're kind of hard to find. We are pretty small MOS, pretty small community inside of a smaller service, which is the Marine Corps. So, but mine is definitely not the most exciting. We've got guys with career history that's in the National Museum of the Marines and touches some pretty big events in the IC. So, but yeah, my story begins back in Florida. Grew up in a small family on the west coast of Florida. Had a grandfather that was pretty influential in my life. He was a Navy hard hat diver inside the Navy. So from him, I learned a lot of the discipline and culture of the military that I looked up to as a kid. So, of course, I'm sitting in high school. 9/11 happens. I'm hearing stories of people that I'm going to school with whose family tragically was touched by that event. So I think like a lot of Americans, you're trying to rationalize that as a young man, a young adult. And I told myself right then that, I think the military is going to be a path for me. So, of course, went in and talked to the recruiters. Typical story. You hear the sales spiel from all the recruiters. For me, it was all about going in and skilling up, right? Like making that time in the military and making the sacrifice that I knew a lot of people were going to make count. If I made it out the other end, the conversation was how can I take some skills from the military to use in the rest of my life. So as a part of that process, I'm looking at all the incentives, and of course the Army's throwing out laptops and bonuses and stuff like that. And I get to the Marine Corps recruiter, and of course you see the uniforms, which I'll say right off the bat, Marines, if you ask 10 Marines why they joined the Marine Corps, 9 of them are probably going to say the uniforms, right?
They all got nice uniforms, though. They are some good-looking uniforms. I have to give it to them. I mean, for a long time, the Army had the dress blues, and we all looked like mall cops whenever we took our jackets off. So the Marines, man, what a standard that is.
I thought you guys were close with the blues, and then you come out with the pinks and greens. I'm on the fence with the pinks and greens. I like some of the throwback style of that, but. Yeah, so obviously the uniforms right off the bat, and for me it was, we know we're going into war at this point. It's an inevitability. The AUMF is already being voted on. Troops are being mobilized. I'm still waiting to graduate high school, so the conversation with myself is, if I'm going to do this, who do I want to do it with? And so I ask around and talk to some family friends and my wrestling coach, who's a former Navy guy, and he's like, hey, honestly, the Marines, if you're going to do it with the best basically trained force that's out there. And I think we can all agree, the Marines on some level are they come out of boot camp and their specialty schools is some of the best basically trained soldiers we have in the government. And so, that kind of made it my choice. So the next question was, how was I going to go about it? They had this incentive program along with the delayed entry program. So I made my commitment early in my junior year of high school. And one of the incentives was, if you bring 2 people with you, get them recruited and get them into the program, you get a promotion out of boot camp, which means, a couple extra dollars on the paycheck. So I round up some folks that are also interested and help them at least get in front of a recruiter. And I go in with a buddy's older brother who lived down the street, had graduated high school, and was kind of, in that transition phase, trying to figure out what they wanted to do. So I bring him in. We take the ASVAB, did okay on the ASVAB, and I walk in, and so he looks at both of our ASVAB sheets, and he goes, hey, what do you guys want to do? And so the other guy didn't have some of the same score, and so he's walking through, and I'm like, okay, when's my turn, right? Like, when are you going to tell me what I can do? And he basically looks at my score and throws the book at me and says, I don't know, pick one. So we're off to the races at that point. I chose an MOS originally, aircraft electrician, maintainer, because it had a signing bonus attached to it. And when you're 17 going on 18, $20 is nice. So the promise of a couple $1,000s gets you started. And so I get to boot camp. They have a storm. They have a hurricane that blows through Pensacola at that time, which delays the training program out of boot camp for our primary military occupational specialty training. And so they pull me in and they say, hey, either you can wait here for 6 months as a gate guard until your school opens back up, or we can reclass you and keep your bonus. So there's a couple of us that were in the same boat. From the same platoon, and so we got together and said, hey, look, I don't know about you guys, but gate guard doesn't really raise the hair on the back of my neck. So we all agreed to reclass, and we became a new class of and wait for it, this is a long one, it's a mouthful, electro-optical ordnance maintainers.
You handled that well. I mean, that rolled right off the tongue, didn't it?
I've had to explain it enough that it's become second nature. But basically, what it boils down to is we're the nerds in the armory that fix your NVGs and missiles, fire control systems. So in late 2004, early 2005, we're off to school. That's a very long school. Comes with a 5-year term commitment for the Marine Corps. Funny enough, it was an Army school, so I end up at Aberdeen Proving Grounds in Maryland. Spent about 5 or 6 months there, getting, everything from basic electronic theory all the way up to advanced circuitry, lasers, machining, you name it, as a maintainer. So I finished with that. My first assignment out of school was 2nd Marine Regiment on Camp Lejeune. It was actually one of the subordinate battalions, 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines, who, when I hit the fleet, when I hit the active forces, was on air alert for Iraq. So I sit in there's a kind of receiving unit on Camp Lejeune. I'm sitting there for about 72 hours doing all the admin processing, waiting for a promotion to catch up with me. And so some random first sergeant comes and picks me up at like 7 o'clock at night from the receiving unit, probably as an afterthought. And he goes, "Hey, go ahead and call your mom or call your parents and let them know you're going to Iraq." And I was like, "Okay, roger that." So found out that they were on air alert. Turns out that they had split up the unit at that point. There was a remain behind element and a forward element. So I was part of the remain behind element. Stayed with them for a few months in that status. Never actually deployed that time with 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines. But then when 3rd Battalion, 2nd Marines got back, was sent over to them, which is actually who my orders were originally for. Ended up landing with them. Worked in armory. We spooled up for a deployment in Habaniya, Iraq, in 06, I believe it was. Early 06. So they were just coming off Al-Qaim deployment. We ripped out with a unit that had just rotated out of Fallujah. Of course, this is early OIF and the Anbar province. There's a lot going on there. So I spin up with them. They decide to spool up a personal security detail for the executive officer and the commanding officer of the battalion. So I'm working in the armory one day out there, and somebody comes by and says, "Hey, we'd like to have you on this personal security detail. We figure at this point you've learned your MOS, you've cross-trained as an armorer. So, if anything else, we bring you out there and a gun's down or a system's down, we can have you work on it." So I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds great." Gets me outside the wire. At this time, I haven't done CACs. I haven't done any kind of workup. So I'm as pogue can get. And for the viewers that are listening, if you're not familiar with pogue, person other than grunt, basically a non-infantry MOS coded individual. And so I'm interested in some action. So sign on to this thing, and I go outside the wire my first time, and I realize, wow, I am way out of my league here. These guys are professionals. I'm just playing the part. A little bit of imposter syndrome. So I basically attach myself to the most senior Lance Corporal, and that's a concept that may not translate into the Army, but the Marine Corps, even inside of a rank structure, right? You have your senior and junior, and so you can have some salty old Lance Corporals that have seen a lot of things. And, at the end of the day, I think at the time I was a corporal, so I was an E4. This guy's an E3. So I'm deferring my NCO, experience to him as a professional infantryman. And I basically attached onto his hip and learned everything I could about infantry tactics, machine gun employment, convoy operations, and in a short time, just try to become a SME. So finished out that deployment. But as part of that, and the reason I bring this up is that was my first introduction to intelligence. I had never considered intelligence. Nobody had talked to me about intelligence. I knew intelligence, seeing it in movies, seeing it portrayed in popular media. I think The Green Zone may have been out at the time, right? So you're seeing stuff like that. But I had no idea about it. And I got approached by JIDO, an organization that was rolling around Iraq, a joint IED defeat organization. And they had a program that was basically trying to take individuals and train them up on the things we were seeing in terms of IEDs on the battlefield. Somebody talked to me about, my ordnance background and said, "Hey, you might be a good candidate for being a weapons intelligence analyst." So So I was like, yeah, sounds great. This is another job that I can do while I'm out there. And of course, we're seeing a lot of weird stuff on the battlefield that early on in the conflict. So went to a couple weeks of training. These guys spun me up. And one of my secondary roles became, doing weapons, battlefield intelligence. When you roll up on a cache, you roll up on a site, you do a raid on a facility. You got guys going around doing sensitive site exploitation. At the time, they were using us to augment the identification and description of what we're seeing on the battlefield, rolling it up into some operational intelligence reports, getting it back to the rear. To kind of figure out what was going on the battlefield. Because as a lot of us know, some weird stuff was happening in terms of where stuff was coming from, who was supporting. And that was my first introduction into intelligence. So after that deployment, I went back. I was getting ready for another deployment. My wife at the time, who's now my ex-wife, needed surgery. So I was getting ready to go on another deployment with 3rd Battalion, 2nd Marines. I got pulled off of that deployment because she needed surgery and some significant convalescence. So as part of that, I got orders over to 2nd Marine Logistics Group, going back to my maintainer role. Took over as platoon sergeant. And around this time, we're starting to get to the point where I'm up for re-enlistment. A lot of the folks in that community, it has a high GT, high ASVAB score requirement inside of that MOS. So a lot of guys are looking at similar lat moves into MOSs that also have the same requirement. Somebody had mentioned counterintelligence to me at one point, and a buddy of mine was up in between, do I want to go EOD or something else? So I was talking to him about it, and he asked me if I wanted to join EOD with him and screen and go through the selection. I said, no, man, I like my fingers a little bit too much. And so at that point, I made the decision, I'm probably going to go counterintelligence. So I started looking into the process. There is a pretty significant screening process in the Marine Corps. It is not a entry-level MOS. It is a lat move only MOS for a couple of reasons. Mainly, they want somebody with a couple of years under their belt that understands the Marine Corps on a basic level and has a sense of maturity. I think the Army has something similar. I've heard some of the other services also kind of try to follow those rules. But for the Marine Corps, it's definitely a lat move only MOS. So I get tapped for deployment back to Iraq, this time with a MEF staff. I'm an operational watch chief. So my job is, in addition to making systems work with one another, is also taking information from disparate, sources, non-congealed information and data, and help put that together in a timely manner for a general high-level decision makers to cut through some of that battlefield fog, right, and to help provide support where it's needed on the battlefield. So I'm getting along on that, and I've still got CI in the back of my mind. And my roommate at the time, while we were in Iraq, was brushing up on his Russian. And I asked him about that. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to try out for this counterintelligence thing. So I'm watching him go through this process. Unfortunately, he didn't make it. He was a very smart individual. So I'm thinking to myself, wow, like this guy, he's on top of it. And he didn't get the nod. So I'm starting to get a little nervous, but I go over and speak to the CI folks anyways. And I was like, hey, I hear you guys have this program. I'm up for re-enlistment soon. I'd like to give this a try. And so I don't know if they had an established boarding program out in Iraq at the time, but I work with this gunnery sergeant and get through the boarding process. And it involves, a bunch of aptitude testing, PFT. So I'm running a Marine Corps PFT on Al Assad in the desert heat, and let me tell you, I didn't have the best score, but I passed. And so you go through the aptitude test, and then the big portion of the screening process is the in-person interview, right? And I would consider myself smart on average. Had decent scores in high school, and took the SATs and did well with that. ASVAB did okay. But when I tell you I walked into a room and I felt like the smallest person in there, let me tell you, These guys, I don't know where they even got them, but we're in the middle of Iraq, and they're all wearing pressed Charlies. They've got their ribbon stacks. I mean, I walked past an airfield to this dusty, dirty location, and I walk into this room, and these guys are they could have been a recruiting poster for the Marine Corps. And so they're all silver-tongued devils. And if anybody who was there that day is listening right now, I hope you get a good laugh out of this. But they put me through the grinder, and I'm not going to explain how they did it because that gives away some of the magic for those that it might be considering the move. But they put you through the grinder, and I would not be lying if I said for 90% of that I thought I was a miserable failure. At one point, they even walked me out of the room to gather myself. It was probably just a chance for them to laugh behind my back without me hearing it, but. But it got down to the last portion, and it came down to a question of like rote memory, right? They asked me to recall something I observed on my way into the building, and luckily my gift for memory helped me out there, and I was able to recall, and I probably passed by the skin of my teeth, but I got the nod, and so I'm already out in Iraq, and we start talking about how they're going to get me back to the States. For on-the-job training before I attend the schoolhouse. And so luckily there was a great staff NCO there that said, hey, we could use a hand in the 2X, and what better experience to OJT somebody with than actual on-the-job training right there. So I was able to finish out my year-long tour inside the 2X. I, got to meet the guys doing the job. I looked over their reporting. I saw the things that they were doing. I listened to the questions they were asking themselves as they, kind of worked it out in the bullpen, kind of worked it out amongst themselves. And so I was very fortunate to have that experience because I think it set me well on the road for my schoolhouse experience. So I get back to the States, check into 2nd Counterintelligence Support Company, which is just basically a resource pool of individuals and talent who then gets chopped over to the CI HUMINT company and gets teamed up and ready to deploy. So I'm there waiting my schoolhouse seat, meet some great folks who are still lifelong friends of mine, and finally make it to the schoolhouse. Schoolhouse at the time, and I believe still is, at Dam Neck, Virginia, at the Navy Marine Corps Intel training schools. And on a very edge corner of the base is the CI HUMINT school. So I attend there. I think this is around the 2009 timeframe. And again, just surrounded by talented individuals. You can tell where the screening and the selection process is kind of whittled down to very mature, experienced, consummate professionals who are also very passionate about their job. I will say that the reason why the CI HUMINT MOS and profession inside the Marine Corps churns out such high quality folks is because their entry into the MOS is usually somebody doing the job who is helping screen you down, and then the passion that comes from the instructor cadre at that schoolhouse. People who would spend many, many hours out of their own personal time to stay with you there trying to figure it out. The schoolhouse is a fire hose. It's drinking from a fire hose. It's a couple months long. I believe we were just under 180 training days at the time in order to be a temporary duty assignment versus a PCS assignment. And so it's a very long school, and the entire time you're drinking from a fire hose. I had two very fortunate occurrences while I was at the schoolhouse. One, at the time, the Marine Corps CI HUMINT community did not have CI investigative authority. NCIS actually owned that mission. There was some back and forth while I was out in Iraq of, who owned the tactical HUMINT mission. And so things were very much in flux. When I got to the schoolhouse, because we were drinking from a fire hose and because we did not own the investigative mission, we were actively advised by some of the cadre staff to like, hey, do what you need to pass the test, but you're probably not going to use this. If you do ever have to use it, you can OJT it out in the workforce later on. I'm fortunate because I'm stubborn, and I also had somebody elbow me and say, "Hey, man, you might just also want to pay attention to this too, because I've had some personal experiences with this." And so I did, and that'll come into play later on during another deployment. But so we're getting through the schoolhouse, and admittedly, we got to the Finex. It's a very grueling, very sleep-deprived evolution exercise where they're testing a culmination of all the skills that we've learned up into that point. And I happen to be in a weird class where normally there's about 6 teams. This one we only had about 4. We were kind of like the remain behind for the year. We only had 1 officer in the class. Typically, you have the traditional structure where you have an OIC, a chief, and then the rest of your collectors. I ended up as an OIC for my team. In Finex, I forgot that I was also being graded as an individual, and it was not a team sport. Put some emphasis and focus on the rest of my teammates during a very challenging phase of the Finex, and actually didn't meet the standard. So I ended up going to an academic review board. Had some faculty advisors that were very much supportive in my case, knew that I could do the job. But things being what it was, and to be fair, I tip of the hat to the school commander who gave the decision. But they said, hey, we're not going to let you graduate with this class. Graduating tomorrow, we're actually going to send you back, but we'd like to have you back. So me not being one to be deterred, but just saw it as a challenge, and quite honestly, an opportunity to collect more per diem on a back-to-back TDA rotation. I went back to my unit, checked in on a Friday, stuck around, saw my classmates graduate, celebrated with them, headed back to my unit on a Friday, stopped into my training chief right there, let him know that I was back from the school. And he says, hey, what are you doing for the next 2 weeks? I said, well, I'm waiting to class back up because my next class is in 2 weeks for me to go back. And so, hey, he goes, what do you think about going to this McQuist course? And I was like, yeah, sounds good. Something to burn time and allow me to kind of go through what I had just experienced and decompress in order to, go back with a clear head. What I didn't know at the time is the Marine Corps Instructor of Water Survival course is one of probably the most physically demanding course that the Marine Corps has to offer outside of, at the time, the MARSOC assessment and selection phase and the basic reconnaissance course assessment and selection. And it also involves water. So being a Florida boy, I said, okay, yeah, I can hack this. Show up there, proceed to wreck my body for 2 weeks during this course. Find new depths of pain and learn what it's like to operate without oxygen. But looking back on it, made a good group of friends, pushed myself in a way physically I hadn't done in a while, which is great, and pick up a new skill set. And then I get done with that, and I'm right back to CI HUMINT company to check in the next Monday. So get done with the course. I think we graduated on a Friday. I go home, pack my gear, ready to go back again on a Monday morning to Virginia Beach. So I go back, had a better time of it. The second go around, it doesn't feel like drinking from a fire hose. I'm able to pay attention to some of the more difficult curriculum, make a new group of friends, really take the time to dig into the why, right? It's one thing to learn a skill set. It's another thing to really absorb the context around it. And I imagine as a CI professionals, a lot of them will tell you probably didn't know the job until, 1 or 2 pumps in or a couple of years after you picked up the MOS. And I think that's just a part of the nebulous nature of the job. And people's individual exposure to the big system, the big organization, and where risk is really assumed and how it's dealt with. And so I was fortunate that I had another go around at the schoolhouse to kind of like unpack that while I'm also learning it, so that it took on a new meaning. So I got through that course, graduated, and then I fleet, right? I go back to the fleet, go back to Camp Lejeune, back with 2nd CI Company, and get a call from the monitor. Hey, we need some folks to go to Okinawa, and you've basically hid out in Camp Lejeune for the last few years. So I said, okay, you got me. And so I start calling around, figuring out, what I might be doing over there. Find out that I've already been selected for a team that's planning to go to Afghanistan. So I get there, I check in into Okinawa, lovely place. I'm yearning to go back for any of you that have been there. Check into the unit there, find out that they have a little different way of doing things, being as they're kind of entrenched in the threat, right? Like it's no longer the protection of the domestic United States. They're in it every day. And so I get there, I get to test out some of my newly founded CI HUMINT skills, supporting a few overt programs, a lot of liaison with some stuff that's going on there in the island, and start to get my legs about me. Picked up some great mentors there. In our community, being as small as it is, it seems like everybody knows each other. And we all take the time to mentor one another. I think that's the biggest thing I've learned throughout my whole career is, unlike a lot of people's experiences in the military, it's very rare to find a good mentor. I would say in our community, it's average, it's the everyday. And I've heard that, said from a couple of your other guests on the show, that mentorship makes a huge difference in the way their careers go. So I was fortunate to find one of my big mentors, who ultimately was the head chief for my team. Still a good friend of mine, was in my wedding. And so we're getting ready for this deployment. And so I've got a few things under my belt, and we're going to Afghanistan. What a solidifying experience that was. My only operational deployment experience at this point had been Iraq. I had been warned very early on that a lot of Marines, a lot of U.S. military members were applying similar solutions from Iraq into Afghanistan. So as we're going along getting ready for this, I'm trying to think of it through the lens of my experience in Iraq, and I'm already noticing that, culturally, geopolitically, Afghanistan is a different monster. So we are chopped off as a het in direct support of 3rd Battalion, 3rd Marines, infantry battalion out of Hawaii. We make a few trips out there in the workups to go see them, to get to meet to them, figure out what our HET support laydown is going to be, human exploitation team laydown is going to be in supporting this unit. And along the way, I just found some really smart, experienced people in the unit that we were supporting. We made our biggest wins in the early capabilities briefs with them, letting them know what we were there to do, our experiences, what we could do for them. I think that's where a lot of direct support relationships start off poorly, is just a misunderstanding of what each side of the table is capable of. So we go in and we do our capabilities brief, and then we get to do the workups. And at that point, for me, it was more just proving that I wasn't going to be a strap hanger, right? Like I'm, at the end of the day, when a unit goes out and does their planned infantry mission and comes back off a patrol, the last thing they want is somebody asking to be escorted back out to go do this thing, which is their job, engaging with human sources. And so it was all about winning trust and winning support, and demonstrating value to them. And so we're starting to forge this relationship through adversity, in this training cycle. And then we get out to Afghanistan, and it's a lot of the same. So we land in Garmsir district, southwest Afghanistan. We were the second closest unit, I think, to the border, Baluchistan. So we're out in the Wild West. This is not too long after the retake of Helmand had gone down. We had one of the guys on our team who was with one of the infantry battalions as we retook Garmsir. So he's already, letting us know that this is not going to be a walk in the park. And so, we get ready. We deploy with them. We fly from Japan to Hawaii to a intermediary country, and then make our way into Afghanistan, and spend a few days getting our combatant command qualifications and certifications for the theater. And I'm basically put on a helicopter, alone and unafraid, and dropped off in Afghanistan to meet my unit, and it was on from there. So had a great deployment, and we can talk about the content and things I learned during that deployment later on if you want. But it was a very, very defining deployment for me. A couple big takeaways. I got to see a full HUMINT cycle from recruitment, from targeting to initial contact to, validation, training, assessment, recruitment, termination. I got to see the whole cycle, a process that I understand doesn't happen a whole lot on one deployment. But I was very, very focused on pushing that process forward. The writing on the wall for us at the time was we had retaken Garmsir. There was talk and indications that we were also making a quiet drawdown while I was there. I think we went from something like 64 bases in our area of operations down to, I think, as little as 13. And so for me, as a counterintelligence HUMINT professional, having been in Iraq in the late 2000s, hearing stories of us, having guys there and doing operations in the Gulf War, and then coming back and some of those things coming back into play, in my mind, it was, okay, if we have to leave Garmsir, if we have to leave Afghanistan, what are we leaving behind, right? Are we going to have to do this again in another 5-10 years? Excuse me. So for me, it was all about good, solid, basic operations. It was about, probably a smaller number of individuals that I could rely on over volume, and people that would continue to be useful even when we weren't there. And so that was the focus. Had some frustrations in terms of intelligence operations. As you guys probably know, and as some of the listeners might know, operational coordination can be difficult sometimes in an environment where you have everybody and their brother playing in the playground. From national level intelligence entities to regional security coordinators, State Departments there. Of course, the military is trying to figure out their civil security and rebuilding mission. And there were some frustrations there. But I get done with the deployment, and now I enter back into the world with some fresh eyes. Got tapped again to go to a MEF staff and support operations there to finish out my time in Okinawa. And now I have this strategic battlefield perspective that I've gained on these deployments. And as a CI HUMINT professional, and I'm sure the same is similar in the Army. One of the fascinating attributes of that job is your requirement to engage and provide recommendations to senior staff. I challenge you to find anywhere else in the military where a staff sergeant can be briefing a general on a regular basis and helping make battlefield decisions well beyond your pay grade. And so having that experience, coming back, working at a MEF level, and then seeing behind the curtain how the sausage is made was very interesting. Supported the MEF staff for a little while, and when I came back from Afghanistan, had the opportunity to visit Huachuca, Army's Intelligence Center of Excellence. Big props to the Army for what they put together there. Coming from a sister service and going through the school, very professional, a good experience, a good opportunity to meet folks from around the community. And as part of that, made friends with an individual who was a SOCOM element. I said, hey, I like the cut of your jib. I like the way you think. I think you'd be an asset for us. So I'm like, hey, Scotty, thanks. I appreciate it. Let me go back to my unit. Let me figure some stuff out. I'm coming up on re-enlistment. I'll let you know what's going on. So I get back there, and the thought of that is very interesting to me. So I start talking to some of my folks about getting out to go to the screening and selection that I've been invited to, and run it by my ops chief. And the ops chief goes, hey, we're a critically staffed MOS, man. As much as I'd love that for you, I just can't see how that provides value to the Marine Corps. And so I'm strategizing this. I'm talking to some older folks and saying, hey, what do I do here? What's my play? And they're like, hey, the best you can do is try to convince them that, you go off and do this thing, and then you come back and can hopefully bring some of those advanced skills to the Marine Corps. So I give it my best. I probably failed as a huminter and failed to convince him where he was. He goes, no, sorry, we're not going to let you do that. And the monitor needs your decision. I said, okay, well, I'm going to take leave. And he asked me where I was taking leave, which happened to be the same area where the screening and selection was being performed. He caught on to that quickly. Said, nice try. Leave denied. And so I said, okay, boys, I think our roads are separated here. And so I make the decision to basically leave active duty, mainly in pursuit of my continuing education. I also had goals for myself to attend school, which deployments oftentimes got in the way of. So decided to leave active duty, immediately joined a reserve unit over on Quantico, Virginia, of like-minded individuals, CI HUMINT professionals. Found a good community with them while I attended school in DC for my undergraduate. And while I'm doing that, I get approached by a friend of mine who's working for a contracting company called Mantech. At the time, they had the engineering support contract for Marine Corps Systems Command, and more specifically, the intelligence and counterintelligence human intelligence equipment program portfolio. He was taking off for deployment, so he needed a backfill. Said, hey, sounds good. I'd be glad to help you guys out. Did that for a few years, worked my way up from an instructor to be a subject matter expert, technical engineering type expert in support of that community. Hearing them out about, where they wanted to take the community, the direction they wanted to take it, the technical requirements that would go along with that, and how we get from point A to point B in terms of making that a program. So worked there for a while. Meanwhile, I'm still in the reserves. Did that for about 5 years. So got off of active duty around 2013. Immediately joined the reserves. Stayed in the reserves until about 2018. Meanwhile, the whole time I'm working support the MAR4 Systems Command. And then towards the end of that, around 2018, 2019 timeframe, we had done some work with a company called Vickers Nolan Enterprises. They were doing rapid prototype and development of intelligence concepts, some clandestine concepts, signature management concepts, kind of advanced concepts for the Marine Corps and for the Deputy Commandant for information or intelligence at the time, to help them kind of modernize the way they looked at data and communications in support of intelligence functions. So they had a small, experienced team over there. I applied and got hired on to support the development of some fringe CI HUMINT supportive concepts inside of the Defense Industrial Base. got to attend some pretty cool meetings where people with some huge brains and great vision are looking at, the types of fights that we're, I think, all talking about now, the peer competition type conflicts, and worked with some people who really brought some niche experience to the conversation, and put together some small scale, rapid development concepts that I think we're starting to see now come to fruition. And so that was a pretty awesome experience, leading a small team, going from ideation all the way to minimally viable product. And we kind of ran the course of the requirement for the CI HUMINT element of that contract, and the opportunity to work with Special Operations Command and some of the sub elements came back. Got approached out of the blue to go support USASOC, United States Army Special Operations Command, for some CI support and capability development. And so went over there for a few years, and had a good time there. Learned a lot about the joint environment, learned a lot about what CI can look like when the cuffs are taken off within reason. And had a great experience over there. And then Buddy reached out, actually one of my former instructors at the MAGTAF schoolhouse, and a good friend of mine who was in Okinawa with me, reached out and said, hey, there's this company that I just started working for. He had also left a government position inside of Special Operations Command. And he reached out and said, hey, there's this really interesting product that I found, and I've started working for the company. You're a HUMINTer. You can sell ice to an Eskimo. Why don't you come on over and do some sales and business development? And so that was my first real escape into the corporate world without government safety net. And that was a fun experience. I even challenged my CI HUMINT skills working in sales. It's definitely a different vocabulary, but a similar experience. And did that for a little while. And as they were downsizing, was that last year? I left, and I was getting ready to be married. So I took a break from myself for the first time in a long while. And then I go down to get married down in the Caribbean, and one of my good friends is there, and he said, hey, I've got this thing going. We're sub on a contract to support a component of DHS, and I need a team lead. And so right there over a daiquiri, we shook hands, and that was that. And so that ended up being where I'm at now. So I'm with a small company called Stopso, and we're supporting DHS subcomponent, kind of mature their CI capability as a non-Title 50 organization, which is an interesting environment to be in right now. As you guys probably know, corporations and government entities that are not traditionally law enforcement intelligence based are coming to a self-realization that the threat is not just going after classified information. It's not just going after those closely held secrets. It's, the everyday information that everybody holds. And so there's a bit of an evolution taking place, I think, right now in the government, where those non-traditional, those NT50 organizations, non-IC organizations are pressed to now mature that capability that a lot of other organizations have had, in a way that's meaningful for the whole of government approach for using CI and defending, our interest. So, and that's where I'm at now. So, long winding road.
Well, Mike, so normally we break in and ask questions during somebody as they're telling their story, but your story was so fascinating that we just let you have the mic. It was compelling the entire time, and watch you relive all of those moments as you came through history. But, now that you're 20 years past the point, probably 20 years plus, Was joining the Marine Corps the right decision, do you think? And I always talk to Marines that chase after the Marines because of the hardness factor of it all. It's like it's the hardest military branch. From the outside looking in, it looks so difficult. Was that the reason why you went the Marines? I know you said that it was professionals, but was there a hardness element to that? Like, I wanted to be with the hardest dudes on the planet and do that thing. So, one, was it the right decision? And two, the motivation. Got to get to the motivation. Was that the key motivation joining the Marine Corps?
Yeah. Would I do it again? Absolutely. It may take me a few drinks to sign on the dotted line again, knowing what I know now. But yeah, absolutely, I would do it again. I think the relationships that were formed under adversity and pressure, that I think everyone is familiar with, at least everyone in the military. But I mean, boy, nobody defines hardship better than the Marine Corps. We do a lot with a little, and I think that's what I saw in the Marine Corps and what I knew of the Marine Corps before I got started that really stuck to me is that the emphasis on small unit tactics, the emphasis on every Marine is a rifleman, right? Putting infantry proficiency and operational proficiency first above all else, even if organizationally that's not a great thing. That was definitely something I saw. Like if you're telling me to jump into a pit with lions, and I've got a couple of gladiators, I want to make sure that they're professional gladiators if I'm going to jump in the pit with them, right? And so for me, the Marines was, maybe I guess you could psychoanalyze this and say it's a bit selfish, but if I was going to jump into the pit, I want to go with people who make it their lifestyle, right? It's not just a day job. It's not something they check out on, not to detriment, any other service and their professionalism, but like these guys live and breathe it, right? So, at 18 years old with very little information, that's what I ended up with. Now, I have to say, I do have friends who now have children who are getting close to military age, and I've been asked to speak with them one-on-one because, at that age, who listens to their parents? So Uncle Mike has been asked to talk to them, and admittedly, because of my own personal goals of getting an education as a vehicle through the military, I have to say the Air Force has got a good gig going too. I've known a lot of folks who have joined the Air Force and have joined Intel in the Air Force and have suffered no inability to go to all the schools and training that they'd like to go to and professionalize. And I know a lot of folks that have reached high education levels going through the Air Force. Maybe the Marine Corps now, because we're not, always in Iraq and always in Afghanistan, might be a little different. But my experience, the dwell time was low, and my ability to achieve my education goals was a bit hindered. So, but
I can't wait to see your inbox. Please take a screenshot of your inbox after saying this, after the podcast publish. I'm sure your Marine Corps buddies will have something to say about that. But Jeremy, what do you have?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Mike, thank you for sharing that. Oh, that's funny. Check your inbox. Your Marine Corps buddies are going to beat you up. So looking back, Marines was the right choice. I agree with you. If you're going to go into the pit, bring the right gladiators, especially given that time with everything happened in the CENTCOM, AOR, Iraq, Afghanistan, and the global war on terrorism at large. Looking back a little bit past your time in the Marines, so between the two, when you're sitting there in Iraq, you had the opportunity to go EOD or be a silver-tongued devil. Did you make the right decision?
Absolutely. I was very fortunate to work with EOD very closely in my CIA HUMINT role in Afghanistan and got to learn their job intimately. And as impressive as it is, it's not one that I envy. So yeah, I think I made the right choice. And
do you still have all your fingers?
I do still have all my fingers. We just got through 4th of July. I still have all my fingers. So lesson learned. Funny enough, though, during that Afghanistan deployment, the EOD, the junior EOD member that was in direct support of our unit was the guy who, from my previous MOS, who asked me to join EOD with him. So it was kind of fortuitous that we met back up and then got to share, our paths up until then. And so,
That's
yeah, over a couple late nights, I'm okay with my decision.
So I had the really great opportunity to go to the ops course with a Marine Corps CI warrant officer. We were going through JC together, so about 3 months that we got a chance to get to know each other, and that guy was just incredible. He was the ultimate professional, like you said. And then just recently, in May, I met with another former Marine Corps counterintelligence professional. His first name was Francie. You may know him, but he was a longtime warrant. And again, I mean, the professionalism just like it oozes off of him in across the entire room. So just great people. I've had great experience with Marine Corps counterintelligence folks, and one of the things that they always it's almost like a badge of honor that they consider themselves special operations within the Marine Corps, and that was the way that it was always kind of presented to me. Is that the same? Is that a true statement, or do you see it in that same light?
Um, this is going to probably come from a place of humility, but I mean, we are very much a part of the straight leg conventional structure of the Marine Corps. The places we're employed mainly, in support of an intelligence battalion, which is a functional support battalion to your operational forces. That's where a majority of us live. We have some folks that also exist at the MEF level and the G2X level. So we're kind of self-managing there. Those are typically your senior warrant officers, senior staff NCOs, and our officers, which we have very few of, which is kind of probably unique to an Army equivalent. We run off your guys' manuals. We share a similar equipment program as you guys. A lot of our doctrine is similar to the Army's CI HUMINT doctrine, but we're structured a little differently. You'll very rarely find an officer that lives beyond the rank of 03 that is allowed to continue as a pure CI HUMINT officer. A lot of times they're reclassed as all source or go find another job to do. So, yeah, we have a MARSOC element. We have CI HUMINT collect specialists who are embedded with MARSOC. There's a separate screening and selection process that they go through. There's additional MOS specific training that they go through. I've known quite a few individuals that have gone through that. But I would say we're not special or special forces or special operations within the Marine Corps. The one exception to that may be our MU structure, or Marine Expeditionary Unit structure, where a lot of times the CI HUMINT element of the MU could be placed and embedded inside of a special operations capable element of the MU. Before the invention of MARSOC, I think that's where you would find a lot of people saying that CI HUMINT could be a part of that. But no, now that it is become a permanent part of MARSOC, we do have some individuals that get selected into that. But we see them as separate, basically trained CI HUMINT Marines versus those who would have gone through that additional special operations specific training.
So we announced this podcast through our Discord channel, and there was a question that was going to be posed, and that's now posed to you. So you look at the Air Force, they blend CI and criminal together. You look at the Navy, NCIS, they do something similar. The Army separates it. So CI is different than criminal, which is different than HUMINT. So I look at the Marines, and you guys do it a little bit different than the other services. You've blended together CI and HUMINT. Do you think that's effective? And if so or not, why?
Yeah, wow, that's probably one of the most contentious questions in our community, and it's one that's relatively new, right? A while back, we did have a separation between our CI agents and our interrogator translator MOSs, and they were merged some years ago. I grew up in a generation of folks that were there's very few people that I've interacted with that have done both separately. So I grew up where it was combined together. It's useful, I think, at a tactical level, because in the way that we typically get employed and deployed, very few times do you have the opportunity to work as a doctrinal het or a CHD, right? As a team, you're often geographically dispersed. So you're usually by yourself in support of a large ratio of individuals or a footprint that you're supporting. I think it's useful in the fact that I can go out and do a HUMINT operation with one hat on and come back and be my own CI referent to some degree. And I have to caveat that, because later on in my career, especially working with special operations and high-level HUMINT collectors, I'm sure we all know that it's just tough to play devil's advocate as hard as you need to for a good operation and for good operational integrity. So it's useful in the fact that, with one body, with one billet or BIC, I can help support a commander do both HUMINT and CI operations or functions. And it helps when you're geographically dispersed, so you don't have good communications. You're able to kind of like look at your own operations and be a good judge of where it's going, and maybe some controls that I need to place on this, or a way that I need to further test my source for validation purposes. It also helps provide you good foresight into where a HUMINT operation is going from a CI referent perspective, because I probably am already thinking about the questions that need to be answered before I take this to the next level. But like I said, with the caveat, we can't always be the best devil's advocate for ourselves. Sometimes you need that external voice to challenge you and really to push you to do things that are not easy to do, and performing due diligence in a proper way, and challenging the relationship that you've formed with another individual. So, it's useful for the Marine Corps because of our size and the way we employ our forces. I caught up with a friend who's still in the game this last weekend at a friend's retirement. He tells me that there is a possibility that the two could be broken out again. There's some other things going on with the way that the Marine Corps trains and kind of staffs their CI HUMINT Corps. So it's in flux, but I think general for the Marine Corps, it's useful. But I would challenge those Marines who may be listening to this to also look at it from other perspectives. I'll tell you one thing, that the Army, the way you professionalize the relationships between your HUMINTers and your CI agents is great. You guys make a science out of an art, and I don't mean that as when you're in uniform and you're doing the job, you're looking for people who can make an art out of a science, right? The art of talking to somebody and to perform source operations and to perform counterintelligence investigation interviews. You want somebody who can make an art out of that practice of building rapport and asking good questions and talking to individuals. I think as we get down the road, as the tactical HUMINT, the tactical CI kind of goes away, we need to go back into making a science out of the art. And for a lot of people, that's a curse word, right? That would be something I would tell somebody if they weren't my best friend. Hey man, you're making a science out of it when it's really an art. But I think we do need to go back to the science. And so the Army does a great job of institutionalizing that knowledge and that process compared to some others.
Yeah, for our audience out there, don't fall in love with your asset. Whether you're going to do your own case reviews as a HUMINTer, just don't do it. Take that second look, step away, ask a buddy. Mike, we are coming up on time, and let me ask you this before I hand it over to Ryan. So if our audience wanted to reach out to you, how could they do that? If they had questions, wanted some mentorship or advice, how could they do that?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me, Mike Houle on LinkedIn. Be the same gorgeous mug you see right in front of you as the profile picture, or you can reach out to me best way right now is michael.houle@stopso.com, stopso.com.
Well, that's awesome. Before I let you get out of here, because you touched on something right towards the end of your story, we have coined that 1985 was the year of the spy, and now we're 40 years later. And 2025 is the year of counterintelligence. Where do you see counterintelligence in the corporate environment going? Do you think that we're going to get there where we see robust counterintelligence programs active in the corporate environment and the defense industrial base? And if so, what would that look like from your perspective?
That's a great question, but I don't think it's a question of will we or won't we. I think the answer to that is we need to. We absolutely need to, right? If we think about the way our adversaries are performing their intelligence operations, the way that they're driving forward their national initiatives, you see a volume-based approach, and you see an approach where the traditional targets of intelligence collection are different, right? They're ideologically different than the way we've looked at the problem for a long time, going back all the way to the Cold War. I think the answer overall is yes, we need to. We need to see CI and more specifically strategic CI at the highest levels of government, in places where counterintelligence was not traditionally performed inside of government, those NT50 organizations, those organizations that may not on a daily basis deal with classified information. But wherever you see IP, wherever you see process advancements, economic property, the things that make America great are going to be the targets that our adversaries are going after. In the corporate world, I think some larger organizations have been thinking about counterintelligence for a long time. You're starting to see the middle and small companies growing in that space, which is a great thing to see. I know that's a target audience for you guys, and I know it's a place where it's needed quite heavily. One of the nuances that I think that I'd like to see more discussion on, it's happening in the government right now, which is strategic CI. Going back to strategic principles that we've seen before, we've done them before. Going back to the stories you guys told about deception in World War II, and the way we structured some of these early organizations, we're capable of it. I think it's gonna be a process of relearning it. A friend of mine, Roald Moyers, just wrote for the Intelligence Studies Journal a piece about strategic CI going into the future. He proposed a divorce of CI principles and functions from traditionally minded security functions. I think that's going to be unique in the government space. I tend to agree with him. I think that that's a requirement for the government space. In the corporate world, I think we're still at a place where security and CI should absolutely be close at hand to one another. I think they're two people traveling down the same road. And so I think there's going to be a difference going forward between what the government's doing and what the corporate world is doing. But if we're going to match a whole of government adversarial collection approach, we absolutely have to be considering whole of government CI principles and practices.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. Well, Mike, it's been such an honor to have you on the podcast, our first Marine. You've got a great story. And yeah, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come and have a conversation with me and Jeremy.
No problem, guys. It's been a lot of fun. I look forward to see where you guys go in the future.
Yeah, Mike, first, congratulations on the marriage a year ago, yeah? So congrats.
Yeah, a year ago, and got a little one on the way here pretty soon. So.
Oh, man, really good wedding time. So, thank you for your service and dedication in the Marines. You mastered the craft, right? You were passionate, you were dedicated, you mastered the craft when you're in Okinawa, when you're downrange. So much so, you instilled and built confidence with GO as a staff sergeant. That's no easy task. When you can go in there and articulate real risk, real vulnerabilities to a GO to make a decision, it just goes to your capability and the time you took to truly master and perfect the craft. Thank you for your continued service. And to echo what Ryan said, thanks for taking the time to jump on board with us this afternoon.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, Jeremy, what a great episode, man. Well, we're at time. Again, we have all of these great initial conversations and we hear these great stories, but, we never leave enough time to really dig into the topics of the day. So I'll say it again. This is another opportunity where we need to have a part two. And we need to go back, as we get a little bit higher count into the podcast. We need to reach back out to some of our previous guests and bring them on, and let's dig deep into some of these hardcore topics that we just brushed the surface on. What do you think?
I love that, Ryan, especially, as we try to come up or as we come up on episode 50, start looking at rebooking some individuals. Speaking of episode 50, kind of kicked it off with this, right? For our audience out there, you silver-tongued devils, if you are in actually the community, reach out via dispatch, via Discord, if you're part of it. If you're not and don't know what they are, reach out. We'll tell you all about it. We'll get you a part of the community we're developing. Reach out through LinkedIn. Let us know what questions you want posed to our panel. It's decades, probably over a century of experience, between two of them at least. And we're going to have 5, I think, on minus us, right, Ryan?
Right. Well, Jeremy, another great episode. So how can people get in touch with us, Jeremy?
Yeah, so reach out through our website, www.ixnsolutions.com. Give us a like, give us a follow. Check out the rest of our podcasts. This will be episode, probably 38, 39, 40-ish, wherever we're at, Ryan. We're right around the 40s. But if you have a topic you want us to discuss, reach out, let us know. If you want to be a guest, better yet, let's get you on board. Thanks for giving us a listen. And Ryan, over to you, brother.
Yeah, and I'll end it just like I do every time. If you come across a threat or a risk, recognize it for what it is, react to it appropriately according to the training that you've received from counterintelligence professionals in the past, and report it to security professionals so that we can take action on it. And until the next time, thank you very much for listening.